My name is Evelyn Hart, and I am 62. I used to teach piano for a living, the kind of teaching where your hands learn the weight of a child's fear, and your patience becomes a metronome. Even now, I still believe melody can stitch together what life splits apart. That morning I woke before the sun. I skimmed my fingers across the keyboard one final time before leaving. Half blessing, half goodbye. The little rental on Savannah's east side smelled faintly of rose water, the same scent I wore the day I first brought my daughter home from the hospital. On the counter, a coffee sat cooling beside a single slice of toast, spread with the thinnest veil of butter. I didn't finish either. Hope can be more filling than breakfast. I'd spent months paying off a gift for her, a porcelain dinner service, bone white with a thin band of platinum. Every plate was a promise paid in installments. The wedding invitation lay beside it, corners smoothed by my thumb. Today we might find our way back, I told myself. I put on a burgundy dress I had ironed flat the night before. It reminded me of a good Merlot, warm, forgiving, dark enough to hide its history. I clipped pearl earrings to my lobes, nude pumps on my feet, then opened the small jewelry box where my wedding ring used to rest. The empty groove looked like an outline of silence. I had sold it quietly to finish paying for the china. Some goodbyes don't need an audience. The phone rang just as I lifted the wrapped package. May's voice came through in that pragmatic tone she uses when she's telling me the truth without drawing blood. Evie, remember what I said. Don't hang your heart on today. Just show up. I know, I whispered. It's Jenna's day, not mine. Still, kindness is not too much to expect. When the call ended, I rubbed the pale line around my finger where the ring once lived and breathed in. Then I headed out. The church thrummed with lilies and golden glass. People grouped in clusters, laughter blending with the organ's hum. A 20-something coordinator with a headset scanned her list. Name? Evelyn Hart. Hart. Yes. 5th row. Her smile was polite, her finger firm. I glanced at the front pews, already claimed by a world that had never needed me. Eleanor Whitmore, the groom's mother, sat in navy silk, pearls glowing like approval. I nodded and followed instructions. Row 5. Shoes whispering on the runner, gift clutched, smile practiced. Mothers know the choreography. The ceremony ended in a snowfall of applause, and the crowd spilled toward the reception like a tide. Light slid along polished floors. Servers glided past with trays of champagne, the bubbles bright and relentless. I followed the seating cards until I found mine. Table 8, tucked near the kitchen door. Every time it swung, a draft nipped my ankles. Our plates arrived with pale chicken and vegetables that looked as if they'd been waiting since morning. Around me, pleasant strangers exchanged real estate advice, vacation itineraries, and investment tips. No one asked how a woman could sell her wedding ring and keep her dignity in the same week. Across the room, Jenna laughed beside Eleanor. For a fleeting second, the light caught Jenna's hair the way it used to when she'd race through our backyard with a plastic crown and grass-stained knees. A necklace shone at her throat. My mother's pearls, the ones I'd promised she could wear on her wedding day. She hadn't asked. I hadn't said no. I lifted my glass of sour wine and mouthed, "They suit you." But my words drowned under the conversation's tide. A spoon chimed against crystal. The room quieted. Jenna stood, slender and composed, a microphone glinting in her hand. "To the people who shape us," she began, "to those who held us up." She smiled a polished smile. "My real family are the ones who make me happy." Applause dropped like hail. For one bewildered heartbeat, I clapped too, until I understood. Her eyes swept the crowd and landed on me, steady and cool, You can go." Air left the room. A server halted mid-step. Someone coughed. Heat rose to my face, but my spine stayed straight. I set my napkin by the untouched bread and stood carefully, holding the gift, weighty with months of sacrifice, against my ribs. A chair scraped in front of me. A slow, deliberate sound. Another body rose. Richard Whitmore, the groom's father, was on his feet, his gaze not on his son but on my daughter. Light glanced off the rim of his glasses. The hall forgot how to breathe. 4 days earlier, I sat at my kitchen table, a calculator and bills stacked like bad weather. The morning sun scratched a bright line across the linoleum, catching every chip in the countertop I'd meant to fix and never did. I added and added again, as if gentleness could bribe arithmetic. It didn't. The final payment for the china was due. My piano waited in the living room, half draped in a quilt against dust. The once ivory keys had aged the way photographs yellow, softly, with stories. I'd guided hundreds of small hands there, teaching them songs they'd later misremember. That instrument had been witness to birthdays, sleepless anxiety, and letters from my husband when work kept him on the road. It wasn't just a piano. It was a living room's heart. A knock. Mr. Keating, the reseller, held a folded contract and the kind of look people bring to funerals. "You certain, Ms. Hart? She's a lovely piece." "She's ready for another house," I said. He counted out cash, meticulous as a pharmacist. He glanced up. "You're doing this for someone." "For my daughter," I answered. After he left, I sat on the vacant bench and listened to the absence. I told myself this was how love is counted, not by what you keep, but by what you release. That evening, I wrapped each plate in soft tissue, the faint scrape of cardboard closing like the click of a promise. I wrote a card in looping script. "May your table always be full, and your heart even fuller. Love, Mom." The next morning, I laid the burgundy dress across the bed, pearls beside it, and those honest pumps I've had since a party I never ended up attending. May called again. "You sure you want to go, Evie? She hardly answers your messages." "She's my daughter," I said. "If there's a door, I'll knock." "Winter's cold," May warned, "but spring shows up anyway." I dabbed rose perfume at my wrists, looked at the empty patch of carpet where the piano had lived, and told the room, maybe lied to myself, "I'll play again someday." Then I lifted the gift and stepped into sunlight that pretended to be gentle. The church on the hill wore white ribbons and early light. Bells sifted down from the steeple. Inside, perfume and chatter ricocheted off stained glass. The headset girl appeared again like a traffic cop at a parade. "Name?" "Evelyn Hart." "Hart, I have you in the 5th row." I nodded, thankful for at least being on the list. From row 5, the altar looked far away, blurred by other people's importance. I smoothed the burgundy skirt and told myself that love doesn't measure distance in feet. The organ swelled. We rose. Then there she was, Jenna, moonlit satin, precise steps. Daniel waited at the front, expression unreadable. As she passed my row, her eyes brushed mine. Polite recognition, like spotting a neighbor at the grocery store. Then forward again, to the future with other people's names on it. Vows were spoken, applause scattered. On the steps outside, sunlight made everyone young. A program found my hand. Reception to follow at Whitmore Hall. 5th row or not, I would go. Sometimes love's only job is to show up even when it isn't invited to sit. Whitmore Hall shimmered under chandeliers. Light dripped from crystal like liquid applause. Shoes clicked over floor so polished they looked wet. A neat line formed at the seating chart like travelers boarding first class. I scanned until I found it. Evelyn Hart, table 8. Letters dressed up in gold calligraphy to soften the blow. Table 8 lived in the gusty purgatory by the kitchen. Every time a server pushed through, the air clipped me. I tucked the gift beside my chair and patted the bow the way you soothe a child. Around me, the talk was easy. Golf, remodels, indexes, doing well. A man blinked at me. Friend of the family? Mother of the bride. His eyebrows stuttered upward, then dropped behind his wineglass. Lovely ceremony. Yes, I said to the rim of my cup. Across the room, Jenna moved like light through cut glass. She leaned into Eleanor, head tilted, the pearls at her throat flashing like a small, expensive lightning. My mother's pearls. I kept waiting for a nod, a glance that said, I see you. Nothing. Nearby, a woman fanned pictures of a Santa Barbara beach house. You know sunsets there, she sighed. The closest I'd been to the ocean lately was a magnet on my refrigerator. I tasted my wine. It was lukewarm, bitterness threading through it like a seam. Laughter detonated at the head table. I folded my napkin once, twice, as if neatness could anchor me. Then the spoons chimed, and the room bent toward Jenna. She thanked guests, voice smooth, gestures choreographed. My real family, she said, are the ones who make me happy. The line hit like a fist wrapped in silk. Her gaze locked on mine across the distance. You can go. The parquet tilted under my feet. I heard cutlery hush itself in surrender. I lifted the gift box, stability made of porcelain, and stood. My chair whispered across the floor, a sound too loud for how gently I moved. I wanted to say I'm proud of you or I understand. Anything to bridge the river between us. Words snagged on my teeth. That's when another chair scraped. Slow, intentional. Richard Whitmore stood at the front, one hand on the back of his chair like a judge's palm on a bench. He looked at his son, then at Jenna, then at me. Not yet, he said. The two words rang like a low bell. A hush opened, deep and wide. Daniel's stare flickered. Eleanor reached for her glass and missed the stem, then caught it, knuckles pale. Richard stepped forward once. The polished floor mirrored his shoes, tiny and precise. Let's not confuse grace with weakness, he said. Not loud, but the kind of voice that organizes a room. I lowered my eyes, not in shame, but to survive the moment without crumbling. Air returned to my lungs in cautious portions. For the first time all evening, I felt the weight in the room shift off my shoulders onto the scales that measure right and wrong. He addressed the crowd with an old-fashioned steadiness. I've seen plenty of weddings, but celebration without truth is just expensive noise. He looked at Jenna, then at me. In the weeks leading up to today, I heard things no father should hear about any mother. Jenna stiffened. I didn't assume, he continued. I listened, and I checked. From his jacket, he pulled a folded paper. I spoke with May, her sister, in everything but blood, he said, offering me a small nod. I learned about late-night shifts, extra gigs, a piano sold, and a ring pawned, so the bride could stand here today. The room inhaled all at once. I gripped the gift until the ribbon cut into my fingers. Richard lifted a second page. Before I welcome someone into our family, I want to know who I'm welcoming. Last night at the rehearsal dinner, I watched a small test. Nothing cruel. A server brought the wrong drink. Some people are kind when the cameras are on. Character is who you are when a busboy makes a mistake. A murmur swept the tables. Daniel's jaw tightened. A realization walked across his face. Kindness isn't a necklace, Richard said. You can't put it on for show. He turned fully toward me. No mother who gives her life for her child should be told to leave her child's joy. Not ever. Silence settled like a soft, definitive stamp. Jenna's eyes trembled. Richard laid the papers on the linen. tuition receipts, hospital invoices, a sales slip for an instrument that held a lifetime of Sundays and lullabies. Tonight was supposed to include a gift from Eleanor and me, he added. A down payment for the newlyweds' first home. I won't build a house on disregard. We'll redirect those funds, honoring what actually matters. I stood very still with the gift tight to my ribs, hearing my own heartbeat and nothing else. I hadn't asked for a champion, but there he was. Mrs. Hart, Richard said, eyes kind but steady. You've given beyond measure. People should see what family really means. Whispers moved like grass in a strong wind. Jenna's composure smudged at the edges. The chandelier's light blurred until the room looked underwater. Daniel rose, pushing his chair back with a sound that startled even the glasses. He looked from his father to me, and something broke open in him. Then he turned to Jenna. Is it true? She opened her mouth, but only a dry inhale came out. The papers on the table shivered in the air conditioning. I thought we were starting this with honesty, Daniel said, setting his ring down by the stack of evidence. It pinged softly, small, final. I can't promise my life in the same breath as this, Eleanor gasped. Daniel, don't. This isn't... It's exactly the place, he said, calm and devastated. If love isn't honest here, where is it? A low tide of sound rolled through the guests. Shock, sympathy, the creak of rethinking. I stood at the aisle between tables, gift anchored to my chest. A woman who'd brought plates to a feast and still left hungry. Jenna turned toward me, mascara breaking tears. Mom, I didn't mean... The plea fell apart. I stepped closer. Distance shrank but didn't disappear. Some lessons, I said softly, won't be learned until everything else is gone. The band never resumed. Applause never arrived. I turned, and the doors recognized me. People made space, not out of deference, but because truth had just rearranged their furniture. Outside, the Georgia evening had cooled. The scent of lilies still clung to the air like an old promise. I walked to the curb with the gift in my arms. I didn't wait for a car. I just breathed. Morning entered my apartment like an apology. My dress hung over a chair, creased with humiliation and perfume that had outlived its charm. Yesterday's coffee sat on the table, cold and stubborn. The gift box lay unopened on the counter, a monument to what could have been. The phone rang. Evie. May's voice spread warmth across the room. I saw the video someone posted. In 2025, everything is televised, especially the things that shouldn't be. You owe no shame to that hall, she said. You were the only one who stood upright. I just wanted her to be happy. You did more than enough. One day she'll see it. Maybe not now, but one day. I stared at the empty square where the piano had stood and felt the ache of an amputated song. After we hung up, I found an envelope propped by the vase of carnations. No return address, just my name in a careful hand I hadn't seen in years. Thomas's handwriting, my late husband, round and tidy, the way he used to label the Tupperware he knew I'd otherwise forget. My fingers trembled as I opened it. If Jenna forgets, remind her who made her. And when you remind her, don't forget who you can still become. The letter must have been stashed somewhere, discovered by chance, and mailed by a person who didn't sign their name. I traced the ink with my thumb until the words stopped shaking. Outside, the little garden strip we'd planted with cheap tools shimmered with dew. I stepped into the yard barefoot, the grass cool, the river's distant glitter teasing the horizon. I tried, I whispered. I did everything we promised. The letter warmed under my palm. I could still be more than this ache. That evening the phone started an assault, Jenna's name lighting the screen like a beacon. First call, second, fifth, 10th. I set the cell face down. By the 15th, I lit a candle and wrote one sentence in my notebook. Silence is a boundary. By the 27th, the flame had tunneled the wax into a small moon crater, and quiet finally arrived. I put the phone in the drawer with Thomas's letters. Some conversations you save for when both hearts are steady. Night pressed its ear to the window, my chest unknotted by degrees. In the quiet, I could almost hear the ghost of Middle C, the memory of a melody playing from inside me, where no pawn ticket could reach. 2 days later, rain tapped the windows with shy knuckles. I steeped chamomile and wrapped myself in a blanket that smelled like lemon detergent and yesterday's resolve. A soft knock came at the door. 3 uncertain taps, familiar and frightening. Through the little window I saw Jenna, hair stuck to her cheeks, lilies drooping in her arms, mascara's map smeared by weather rather than vanity. I opened the door. She hovered at the threshold, apology bundled in damp petals. "Mom," she said, small as a schoolchild. I didn't know where else to go. "Come in before you catch cold." I took the flowers and set them in a clean vase. She glanced at the bare rectangle where the piano used to be. "You sold it," she breathed. "For something I thought would last longer," I said, patting the couch. "Sit. You're shaking." "I messed up," she whispered, eyes searching the carpet. "I don't even know how to begin." "Start with breathing," I said, then listening. She cried fast, unguarded, the way tears fall when there's no one left to impress. Everyone saw it, the things I said. "Words can cut," I answered, "but quiet can mend, if you let it." Footsteps crossed the porch, a calm voice from outside. "Everything okay, Miss Hart?" Sergeant Brooks, my neighbor, peered from under the awning. "We're fine," I told him. "Storm's picking up. Call if you need anything," he said, tipping 2 fingers from his cap. I closed the door. "Who was that?" Jenna asked, startled. "A neighbor who checks in when weather turns rough. There are always people willing to help if you knock on the right door." She nodded, pressing the tea mug between both palms like it could steady her. "I don't expect forgiveness tonight," she said. "I just need to try." "Trying is a start," I answered. "Forgiveness isn't a revolving door you push through by force. It's a front porch. You knock, then you wait." The storm deepened outside, but in the living room the air settled. We sat with the sounds of rain and breath. "We'll talk again," I said finally, "when you're ready to listen all the way." She nodded, eyes clear for the first time in months. The silence between us didn't feel empty. It felt like space we could grow into if we were careful. Morning rinsed the neighborhood clean. Sunlight laid thin bars across the kitchen table. I set out 2 plates of cinnamon toast without announcing hope. Jenna sat opposite me, hair pulled back, face bare, the lilies she'd brought opening on the windowsill like they believed us. "If you want to fix this," I said, "there has to be a plan." "I'll do anything," she said, voice husky from a night of honest crying. 3 conditions," I replied. "Not punishments, pathways." She straightened. "Okay. First, help, real help, therapy, counseling, somewhere to strip the varnish from whatever made you cruel. Pride is pain wearing lipstick. It needs air, not applause." She swallowed and nodded. "I'll go." Second, accountability, not to me first, to the people you harmed, Richard and Eleanor, Daniel, the staff who were treated like scenery. No excuses, just truth. "That's a lot of people," she said. "Healing weighs more at the beginning." She wiped her cheek. "And third?" "Start from 0, I said. Not from borrowed clout or gifts. Build a life that belongs to you. I will walk beside you, but I won't carry you." Her fingers braided together. Does start from zero mean without you? It means without expecting me to be the floor under your feet. I'm your mother, not your foundation slab. She breathed out, and for once, didn't argue. I don't want the easy way, not anymore. Good, I said. Love that costs nothing learns nothing. We ate quietly. Birds flung water from their feathers outside like confetti. Before she left, she said, "I'll find a counselor today." "Tomorrow," I said. "Begin again." When the door closed, the apartment went still, but not lonely. The lilies tilted toward the light as if they agreed. A week later, I drove east while the day warmed up like a promise. The Tybee Island shoreline opened in front of me, silver light unraveling across the water. Gull cries drew invisible lines in the sky. I parked and stepped onto the sand barefoot. The tide lapped my ankles with old blood patience. I carried only a small envelope, Thomas's letter, edges softened by rereading. I picked up a tiny shell, curved like a listening ear. The ocean kept breathing. Remember who you can still become. For years I had lived like motherhood was a single-lane road with no exits. But standing there, wind unbraiding my hair, I understood. I am not only the sum of what I give away. I knelt and set the letter and shell on the sand. I reminded her, I told the wind. Now I'm reminding me. The sea reached for my footprints, ironing them into invisibility. I turned back toward the causeway, and for the first time in a long time didn't check over my shoulder. 2 days after that, I sat at a small cafe along the river walk, sun glazing the water, the air salted and warm, when Richard arrived. He moves with quiet authority, the kind that doesn't elbow people out of the way. He thanked the barista by name, took the chair across from me, and folded his hands. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "Me either," I admitted. "No one should be humiliated like that," he said gently. "Not at a party, not in a church, not anywhere. I wanted to see how you were holding up." "You stood up," I said. "That mattered." He nodded, eyes narrowing in thought. "My mother had nothing when I was a boy. She built a life with grit and grace. When I heard what I heard about you, I thought, here's a woman just like her. And I wondered if there was a way to make something good grow out of this mess." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, a simple proposal, a community space, classes, counseling, job support, a place where women who'd been dismissed could find footing. "I can fund the building," he said. "You have the soul and the skills. Eleanor is on board. We'll keep the lawyers honest." A soft voice joined us. Mariah Benton, attorney, gray hair pinned tidy, briefcase squared to purpose. "I've drafted the 501c3 paperwork," she said. "If you're ready, we can file this week." It felt like the moment after you stop holding your breath and discover air is still here. "This is fast," I said. "Sometimes healing moves the second you stop arguing with it," Mariah replied. At the counter, I spotted Eleanor, hesitating, then placing an envelope quietly in the donation box the cafe keeps for local shelters. She met my eyes, nodded once, took a seat alone at the back. I reached into my bag and set the Tybee shell on the table. "If we do this," I said, "it has to feel like home, like a second chance that doesn't smell like pity." Richard smiled. "Then let's begin." And we did. We started in small ways that didn't make for good photos. There were permits to request, rooms to measure, walls to paint in warm tones that wouldn't feel like a clinic. We argued about flooring. Vinyl was cheaper and easier to clean, but wood felt like dignity underfoot. We chose a hybrid plank that looked like oak and could survive 1,000 coffee spills. Whenever I hesitated, Richard had a way of redirecting my second-guessing without stepping on my toes. "You have the taste," he'd say. I have the budget. And for once in my life, that didn't sound like someone taking control from me. It sounded like someone handing it back. Mariah brought paperwork in neat stacks and legalese translated down to human. She sat at a folding table in the dusty lobby and walked me line by line through governance and conflict of interest statements and why boards matter and what accountability really means. I initialed, signed, and then signed again. When my hand cramped, she smiled and placed a small bottle of lotion next to the pen. Occupational hazard, she said. Philanthropy dries the knuckles. Eleanor, Mrs. Whitmore, showed up one afternoon with a plastic tote of candles and a box of mugs. She hovered in the doorway like she was walking toward a line she wasn't sure she was allowed to cross. We had both been audience and antagonist to each other without ever meaning to. I met her halfway. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. She took a breath of the paint-smelling air. "We all have blind spots," she said quietly. "I'm working on mine." She didn't ask for absolution. She offered help. We labeled the mugs and set the candles on a high shelf, and every once in a while our hands bumped, and neither of us jumped. We picked a name that didn't taste like pity. Harbor House. There is a particular comfort in places where the door opens toward the water. May walked in one day, lipstick on and sleeves rolled, and said, "You're going to need a better coffee maker." She donated the good kind, the kind that whooshes like it's inhaling courage. She also brought a stack of woven blankets someone in her church had made, each with a little tag that said, "You are not ruined." We draped them across chairs like quiet invitations. The local paper did a small piece after our city council member stopped by and realized this wasn't just another ribbon waiting to be cut. They took a picture of me that made my nose look bigger than usual. When the article came out, I stuck the clipping on the community board next to the flyers for GED tutoring and a support group for women re-entering the workforce. "If people see you," May said, "they'll stop stepping on you." She has a gruff kindness that lands like a handshake. Jenna stayed away those first couple of weeks after our planned conversation. I didn't interpret absence as failure. Boundaries have a way of startling the people who never noticed the fence before. Then, one afternoon, she texted me a screenshot, an email confirmation from a therapist's office. Her first appointment was scheduled for the following day at 2:30. The message had no emoji, no performative flourish, just "I'll go" in the proof. I typed back "good" and didn't add anything else, not because I wasn't proud, because pride doesn't need an exclamation point to be real. The day the state approval came through, the sunrise was a pale coin rolling across the water. Mariah arrived before me and left the stamped paperwork on my desk with a note. "It's official. Breathe." I did, not all at once, in small sips like a person relearning an instrument and remembering where middle C lives. At the opening, people filled the hall with a hum that felt like a song trying to happen. We cut the ribbon and pretended we weren't about to cry in front of strangers. Richard spoke with his palms open like he was offering something instead of announcing it. I said the fewest words I could say without messing up. "We built something out of a night that tried to break us," I told them. "Now let's make home out of it." After the speeches, a woman with a toddler on her hip asked about job help. A grandmother with troubled custody of her grandson asked about legal clinics. A quiet teenager in a hoodie slid near the snacks, hovered by the coffee, then asked if we had someone who could help her fill out community college forms because she was the first in her family to try. The building swallowed nerves and exhaled calm. We started making lists. We started telling these women exactly what we could do today and what we would work toward tomorrow. In the back office, behind a door with a glass pane we'd frosted ourselves, we had a small keyboard. I bought it at a yard sale, $50 and a promise to pick it up before noon. It was good enough for warm-ups and lullabies, and for letting hands remember how to talk. On a Tuesday after we opened, a woman came in with shoulders held near her ears. She had the look of someone who has been braced so long that relaxation feels like danger. She hovered by the keyboard. "You play?" I asked. "Used to," she said, "when things were quieter." Her name was Nell. Her voice was a drawer opening slowly, checking for spiders. "Want to try?" I asked. She shook her head, then nodded, then held her hands out like she was waiting for rain. Fingers hovered, pressed down. The simplest of melodies walked onto the air like a stray cat deciding to trust. I stood near the doorway and let it move through the hall. People showed up. People stayed. You can build a life on those two facts. We were closing one afternoon when I heard a van door slam and two sets of footsteps climbing our front steps, heavy and careful the way movers walk when a thing matters. Jenna stepped in from the rain, damp hair tucked behind her ears, wearing jeans and a sweater the color of oatmeal and resolve. She didn't wear mascara. She didn't carry a handbag that cost somebody else's rent. Behind her, the movers held a long shape wrapped in quilts and strapped with a belt. She watched my face while they carried it to the far corner near the window, where light pooled in the afternoons. They set it down and backed away. Jenna peeled back the quilts, like you would unwrap a sick, beloved thing. My piano. The exact dent in the bench where Thomas and I used to sit hip to hip while teaching Jenna to find her way along the keys. The small scratch near the pedal from a party where no one danced. The wood gleaming like it had been polished with memory. The consignment store owner had kept it near the back. He'd told Jenna he remembered me, the teacher who apologized to the piano before she sold it. "I found it," she said, voice steadier than I felt. "He let me buy it back. I used the savings we had for other things. I want you to have your voice again." I put my hand on the smooth lid and felt the old world thrum under my palm. When I opened it, the keys flashed like teeth in a smile. I sat and placed one finger on middle C. The note rang true in the big room. People in the hall stopped and turned. Somewhere out of sight, May let out a noise like someone trying not to whoop. Richard, passing by with a box of donated books, paused at the doorway and pressed his lips together as if whistling in reverse. "Do you remember what your father used to say, I asked, not taking my eyes off the keys. "That a home with music is never empty," Jenna said. I played a slow song I hadn't touched since she was afraid of thunderstorms. Jenna sank to her knees beside the bench and leaned her cheek against my arm like she did when she was small and didn't yet know how to make cruelty look like poise. The sound climbed the walls and softened every hard edge I had sharpened for survival. When the last note thinned into the ceiling, I closed the lid and whispered, "Welcome home." I wasn't certain whether I meant the instrument or the woman kneeling beside me. Maybe both. She started therapy like she'd said. The first few sessions left her wrung out and quiet. She didn't text much. When she did, she sent sentences that didn't try to sell me on a new version of herself. I told the truth today. It was ugly. And later, I didn't deflect. I didn't blame you. It felt like watching a house that had always been lit from the outside flip the switch on interior lamps. We built routines at Harbor House, resume clinics on Mondays and Thursdays, a letters to myself writing circle on Wednesday nights, a volunteer attorney donating 2 hours every other Friday to answer questions that keep people from sleeping. Nell sat at the keyboard most Tuesdays and taught tiny chords to a handful of other women who had long ago music in their bones, but too many bills in their mailboxes. The hallways began to smell like coffee and copy paper, and the cheap flowers a man sells from a bucket on the corner. We taped children's artwork to the fridge. We kept a spare box of diapers under the sink. Jenna asked if she could help on weekends. Nothing flashy, just check-in desk, fresh coffee, chairs put back where they belong. She came early and stayed until everything was ready for Monday, so nobody would arrive to chaos and waste their courage navigating mess. She stopped posting everything she did for clout and started sending donation receipts privately. She wrote notes to our volunteers. She wrote apologies. The one to the catering staff from the wedding was the hardest. She delivered it in person, stood in the kitchen, and listened to people tell her exactly what her performance had cost them, not finances, but dignity. She didn't cry as defense. She cried as admission. One Saturday, I walked into the lobby to find Jenna on the floor, building Lego animals with 2 kids, while their mother filled out forms with a case manager. Jenna made a ridiculous sound effect, and both children howled. She looked up and lifted her hand like a kid caught stealing cookies. "Occupational therapy," she said. "Blocks are good for everyone." "Occupational therapy for who?" I asked. "For me," she said, and smiled in a way that didn't ask for blessing. On a Tuesday afternoon, a woman hovered at our door, soaked by a sudden storm, holding a grocery bag that had given up and a picture frame with a cracked pane. Her clothes were threadbare and her nails were clean. 2 possible stories in one person. "Do you need a place to sit?" I asked. "I could use a place to stop," she answered. Her name was Dell, short for Delia. The photo in her frame showed a young woman in a cap and gown, arms around 2 other people, all 3 grinning like the world had just agreed to be kind. "My daughter," Dell said she'd come back when she got set. I guess set takes longer than I thought. "We'll call a shelter we trust," I said. "We also have toiletries and food in the back." She nodded, eyes damp with relief and embarrassment. Pride keeps people on sidewalks. Welcome gets them off. Jenna brought out tea in a paper cup and a small plate with a glazed donut somebody had donated from the bakery at the corner. She sat 3 feet away, close but not crowding, and told Dell there was a woman named Nell who knew how to make a keyboard sound like a tomorrow you hadn't lost yet. Dell laughed through her nose. "I used to sing over laundry," she said, "just to keep the rhythm." "You can sing here," Jenna told her. "Laundry not required." The first time Jenna stood in front of a microphone not to toast herself, but to present a check to Harbor House, her voice didn't shake. "I am not a sponsor," she said to the small group of local donors gathered for coffee. "I'm a student. I'm trying to learn what it means to make things right without making it about me." There was a rustle of polite discomfort from people accustomed to neat, heroic arcs. But in the back, May gave a short, appreciative nod that said, "Look at her finally growing a spine and a conscience at the same time." One evening, as the center emptied and the river pushed a silver line toward the horizon, Richard stood in the doorway with a look I recognized from fathers who have decided to speak plainly. "You know," he said to me, "we were going to give them a house." "You ended up helping build one," I said. He nodded, eyes wet. "A better one." He glanced toward the piano. "I never did learn to play." "You weren't raised by a teacher," I said. "Maybe I am now," he replied, and shrugged like a man who has learned late and decided that's still good enough. On a Sunday morning, Jenna and I took a walk along the river before the center opened. The air carried a faint trace of brine and bakery sugar. She told me about therapy in small handfuls. "It's not just about the wedding," she said. "It's about the way I learned to see love as a mirror instead of a window. I keep wanting it to show me myself instead of letting it be a view into someone else's life." "That's a smart sentence," I said. "Did your therapist feed you that?" "She said it first," Jenna admitted, "but I made it mine." We passed a little church where the congregation sang with the windows open. The sound trailed us like a ribbon. "You know," she said, I used to think you were weak because you were quiet. And now? I asked. And now I realize quiet is just strength that doesn't owe anyone a spectacle. Your therapist said that too, I teased. No, she said. You did, by living. We had a grander event at Harbor House a month later. Not a gala, not a fundraiser. Just a morning where we opened the doors and asked every single person who had set foot in the place to come back and tell one true thing about what had changed. The hall filled with faces. Some I knew by name, some I knew by story, some I knew by the way they now stood with their arms uncrossed. I looked out from the podium and saw May with her sunflower pin, Richard and Eleanor sitting shoulder to shoulder, Mariah with her legal pad closed for once, Nell next to the keyboard, Dell with a small scarf in her hair and a shelter intake bracelet off her wrist. At the back, the council member who had helped at the beginning leaned against the wall, looking like he'd remembered why he ran for office. Jenna stood beside the piano, one hand on the wood, not claiming it, just leaning on something strong. I told them a truth I'd earned the hard way. For a long time, I thought chosen family was about being invited in. It turns out it's also about who you choose to stand beside. You chose each other. You chose me. I am choosing you back. The applause didn't roar. It settled. It felt like hands meeting in agreement instead of noise. When it was Jenna's turn, she didn't angle for the light. She stepped forward and her voice threaded the room without showing off. I don't have a speech, she said. I have a practice. I am practicing gratitude that doesn't expect pardon as a receipt. I am practicing apologies that don't buy anything. I am practicing work that isn't a performance. If you see me fail, I give you permission to say so. From the middle row, a woman called out, "Same." Laughter rolled and then sat down like a well-behaved dog. A donor asked whether we had considered expansion. I said we were still learning to hold what we had without squeezing it. Another person asked if we would host a support group for parents estranged from their adult children. The room got very quiet in the way rooms do when 24 people think they're the only one. Yes, I said, we will. After the questions, I went to the piano. I nodded at Jenna. She lifted the lid. The bench creaked in the old way. We didn't plan a duet. We let muscle memory and surprise do the work. She followed my left-hand chord with a right-hand answer that sounded like apology grown to adulthood. The melody was simple, just enough of a tune to carry emotion without breaking under it. Even the babies got quiet. When the notes thinned into the rafters and the windows grabbed the last of them, the room exhaled. I stood, and for a moment I saw myself as if, through a good friend's eye, a woman with lines on her face, pearls in her ears, a spine that had learned the shape of no, a yes that knows its own worth, hands clean of the need to be thanked in public. I wasn't the mother of the bride anymore. I was a person, standing in a room she helped build. Life didn't stay ideal. That would have been church pamphlet silly. A pipe burst in the back bathroom and soaked a week's worth of supplies. Someone broke in one night and stole the donation box, and when we watched the grainy footage, we argued for 3 days about whether anger or compassion should drive the next thing we did. We compromised. We reported the theft and doubled down on services that kept people from needing to do it again. A volunteer got sick, and we scrambled. A grant fell through. We learned that not all help is helpful, and that some people want to be seen helping more than they want to help. We learned to say thank you and no in the same sentence. Jenna kept showing up. She took criticism without fetching a mirror to admire herself for receiving it. She admitted to the therapist when she wanted to perform contrition and asked for assignments that looked more like chores than catharsis. She kept a schedule. She drank more water. She learned to leave a room without making an exit. I kept some old habits too. I still walked the river alone and collected shells that hummed faintly when I pressed them to my ear. I still wore rose water on days when I needed to remember who had held me with ink and vows. I still wrote in the notebook at night. The sentences grew less like tourniquets and more like scaffolding. Weeks after the opening, after the piano came home, after the first crises and the first calm, there was a knock near closing that sounded like worry trying to be polite. When I opened the door, Daniel stood on the steps in a plain shirt and a face that had lost its wedding day gloss. He held a small box, not wrapped, the cardboard softened by weather. "I wasn't sure if I should come," he said. "I wasn't sure if you would," I answered. He looked past me into the hall, where women were stacking chairs and making jokes about dinners they would eat standing up in kitchens. "I needed to tell you," he said, "that I'm sorry for not seeing sooner. I wanted to believe I married a story, and when the story broke, I thought the truth had done something wrong." He handed me the box. Inside was a framed photo from 10 years earlier, a festival in the park, where Jenna and I were laughing at something off camera, unposed, hair messy, cheeks up. I didn't remember anyone taking it. "I found it when I was packing up my place," he said. "It felt like it belonged here more than in a drawer." "Thank you," I said. He nodded toward the piano. "Do you take requests?" "No," I said, and he smiled in a way that admitted he deserved that. "But you can sit while we play." He sat. I played. Not for him. For the room. For the woman I had been when I wrote checks that emptied accounts for someone else's future. For the woman I was now, who understood that you can't buy love any more than you can pawn it. Jenna came in halfway through and found the harmony like she'd been listening for it from the hallway. When we finished, Daniel stood and clapped once, small and sincere. Then he left without asking for a last word. A few days later, Jenna and I drove out to Tybee again, not as escape, but as practice. The wind tugged at our sleeves. We walked without filling the air. She stooped and picked up a shell shaped like a comma. "I used to think I had to end every conversation with a conclusion," she said. "And now?" I asked. "And now I like commas better." She put the shell in my palm, "for when you want to keep talking later." I slid it into my pocket and felt it press against the curve of the Tybee shell I'd carried for weeks. 2 pauses, friendly to each other. Back at Harbor House, the board approved a small fund for emergency needs. Motel nights when the shelter was full, bus passes, a locksmith. We hung a bulletin board near the entrance titled Wins and wrote everything from "found a job" to "slept 8 hours" to "told the truth," and nobody died on index cards. People stood in front of it like you might stand in front of a map, figuring out where to go next. On a breezy Saturday near the end of summer, we hosted a community brunch under a tent with paper plates, nothing fancy. Dell brought a casserole that tasted like forgiveness and green chilies. Nell led a sing-along to songs you can play with 3 chords and determination. Eleanor surprised everyone by reading a poem about growing up and learning to sit in the cheap seats without resentment. Richard grilled on a donated charcoal drum and managed not to burn anything he couldn't explain away as rustic. Jenna and I moved through the crowd with coffee and napkins and the kind of small jokes you can make when you're no longer trying to convince anyone that you're okay. At one point, I looked up from refilling a sugar bowl and saw her across the tent, head bent toward a woman I didn't know, listening without reaching for a solution like it was a purse. The woman talked with her hands. Jenna kept hers still, palms open on her knees. It was such a small thing. It broke me a little, in the good way that lets more light in. When the tables had been folded and the trash bags tied, when Harbor House had swallowed the clatter and was back to its hum, I walked into the big room and sat at the piano. Jenna came in and took the bench beside me. We didn't make a declaration. We didn't carve a moral into the wood. We just played something nearly wordless and let it climb the air like a prayer that didn't ask for anything except the strength to be thankful. There is a photograph on our lobby wall now, near the winds board. It's not the nosebad one from the paper. May took it with her phone, standing on a chair she was not supposed to stand on. The picture shows two hands on the same key at the same time, one older, one younger, and the glint of a tear on an earlobe where a pearl sits. You can't tell whether the tear belongs to effort or relief. That's right. It belongs to both. Sometimes I pass that photo with a broom in my hand and think about the ways love changed shape and didn't die, the way silence taught us to hear, the way a woman can sell a ring and a piano and still keep the music. When I lock the door at night, I press my fingers to the glass and say, under my breath, the simplest benediction I know: we're not finished. On an ordinary weekday, as the sun leans across the harbor and the gulls begin their evening loops, I stand at the front of the room with a notebook and look out at the faces that walk in. Some are new, some are us. I say hello. I say welcome back. I say we have coffee and copies and time. Someone laughs, someone cries, someone lies, then tells the truth. We start again. We will keep starting again, as long as there is a door and a light and a person on the other side who believes it's worth stepping through. That night, when I turn off the lamps and the piano shines in the low light, like a thing that learned how to survive, I think about a different room, chandeliers, calligraphed cards, a sentence meant to be final. You can go. I smile into the quiet because I did. I left a place where love was a mirror and ended up in a house where love is a window and a key and a bench wide enough for two. Outside, the harbor takes a breath and lets it out. I lock the door and tuck the keys in my pocket next to a shell shaped like a comma. I walk the steps slow. I feel the floor steady under my feet. I do not look back to see whether anyone is watching. I am already where I'm supposed to be. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it resonated with you, please support the channel by subscribing and giving this video a like. It really helps more people find these stories. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What city are you listening from today? Take good care, and I'll see you in the next story.